My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Zach Moore's Always Hold On to Smallville, which continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts. Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is a regular topic of discussion. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. In the 1950s, George Reeves embodied the Man of Steel in Superman's first television adaptation, from its gritty black and white beginnings to the kid-friendly color years. To this day, an entire generation reveres George as their Superman, while for others, the show remains an overlooked, underrated chapter in the character's history. On this podcast, we bring everyone together as we break down each episode of Adventures of Superman, examining it within the context of the series itself, as well as the larger Superman mythology. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 3, Episode 4, Superman Week, is Wearing the Cape cosplayer and returning guest, Daniel Sanchez. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
Color Era, my friend, we're here. What are your overall thoughts, feelings, impressions of the color seasons?
I have enjoyed going back to them on rewatch as an adult with a half-century lifetime of context now, and especially in talking to you and really building up the appreciation for what it took to put the series on in the first place. However, that said, I feel like it's more forced. I think the stories just seem much more shoehorned. The situations are less believable. They don't flow like the black and white seasons. And you can understand all of the reasons why, but the overall effect is, oh, here's another unreasonable jam that they're in, that 10 different things had to absolutely have lined up in order for them to be in this exact predicament. As a child, you don't really have a resistance to that, but I think how well did they age? The black and white ones aged very nostalgically and heartwarmingly, where I think the color ones maybe lost a wheel or two off the wagon.
Well said, and I agree. I think you captured a lot of what I've been feeling about these color seasons as well. Nevertheless, we're here to have a good time. We'll have fun with these episodes. So this one, as Superman Week unfolds, criminal Cy Horton learns about kryptonite from a drugged Jimmy and seeks to destroy Metropolis's hero. This aired on May 14th, 1955. It was written by Peggy Chandler Dick, sister of regular writer David Chandler. So I saw that name. I said, well, that looks familiar. And directed by Harry Gerstad once again. Our guest cast, Herb Vigran as Cy Horton, Tamar Cooper as the artist, Paul Burke as Matthew Tipps, Jack George as Vandeglass, and Buddy Mason as the bank guard. I want to ask your overall impressions of the episode, but I had a sense as I was watching this of why perhaps this was one of the episodes you wanted to come on to talk about. And I might be on the mark, or maybe there's another reason, but over the course of this episode, because the city is celebrating Superman, there's a lot of talk about all of the good deeds that Superman has done. Mm-hmm. And Lois in particular is fielding all of these calls, all of these people sending in testimonials. And as we're hearing about all the things Superman has done, I said to myself, oh, that's probably why this one resonated so much with Daniel. Fair to say?
Very fair. And in fact, I made a special point of listing them because they are wonderful, not just on their own merits, but just as signs of that era. So the feats that they mentioned, not to mention the stacks and stacks of telegrams that were dumped on Lois's desk, he rescued a herd of sacred elephants. He built a playground for boys at an orphanage. He saved a boy from a burning Chinese temple. He built a camp for boys. He got letters from the Home from Underprivileged Children, Home for the Aged, the Foundation of the Blind. I mean, he just tried to make everyone have a better existence. And the fact that he, as Clark, was against celebrating Superman Week from the beginning. And he made a point of telling Lois the reason we're all running around like crazy has nothing to do with me. If you recall, and he points, I was against this idea from the beginning. That really resonated with me because Superman would not celebrate himself. He would try actively to not make him the point of it all.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that was what I had in my mind as I was watching this. And I guess what stood out to me, and I thank you for, it's so funny because as I was putting together my synopsis, which I'll start reading in a moment, I purposely didn't list them off because I said to myself, I know Daniel's going to have the list. I knew it, and I was right. But what was so nice about it was that some of them were true saves, right? But others were just him helping out the community or doing a favor for Perry White. And that was nice to hear. I think a nice message to deliver and felt in keeping, right, with this show and this version of the character. So I appreciated all of that.
I like that Perry acknowledged that he would need a stack of telegrams himself to thank Superman for everything he's done.
Yeah, that was a very nice touch as well. I'll say overall, I did enjoy this episode, and I think what I liked about it was how much was going on in it. Like, to me, it didn't feel busy. It actually gave it a good sense of energy, I felt, especially maybe in relation to certain other episodes that we've been hitting on, because you have the Superman Week festivities, you have this business about the kryptonite, you have, by the end of the episode, Clark having to interview Superman, which we'll get to. Each one of those things probably could have sustained an episode, but you have all three together, and I just kind of liked it. Like, I liked the energy of this one.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, this one gave you a lot to follow, but it didn't feel like work. It felt like almost this is the hustle and bustle of a typical day at the Daily Planet, just notched up maybe one.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. All right, so let's get into our breakdown here. Superman poses for a portrait in Clark Kent's apartment as part of the Superman Week festivities. At the planet, Lois struggles to keep up with all the calls and telegrams coming in with testimonials from people Superman has helped. Lois doesn't notice as Jimmy reads a message on her desk, then quickly bolts on an unknown mission. Perry scolds Clark for being late and tells him he needs Clark to look into Cy Horton, as rumor has it he's up to a new caper. Clark wonders if Jimmy saw the note about Horton that was meant for Clark. So, thoughts on our opening sequence here?
Not a bad setup. Not a bad setup at all. And for once, it's nice to see Jimmy running off, getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Instead of Lois. But no, it was a good hook.
It was. I have to admit, maybe I was just so fixated on Noel Neill, but I didn't even clock Jimmy finding the message on the desk. I mean, I saw him with the papers, but it just didn't register that something registered for him, right? And then I went back and it was there. It was subtle, but it was there. But I guess I was just so distracted.
Exact same. I only caught it on rewatch because I was listening to Noelle list Superman's feats, and so I was watching her.
Yeah. No, effective setup for sure. Jimmy shows up at Horton's place disguised badly as a telephone repairman, and Horton sees through his fake mustache and clumsy routine. He forces Jimmy to drink a truth serum, then asks if Superman has any weaknesses. Jimmy spills the beans about kryptonite, its effect on Superman, and the fact that the only known sample is encased in a lead pipe at the bottom of the bay. Horton lets Jimmy go, but clearly has a plan that does not involve fishing out the pipe himself. Loved this scene. There's a lot going on here. I don't want to forget, I complain a lot about the lack of continuity across episodes, and I think that's fair, but this is a wonderful welcome instance where this is a direct reference to the season 2 episode, The Defeat of Superman, where they introduce kryptonite. And yes, the synthetic kryptonite that's created in that episode ends up in a lead pipe thrown into the water. I'm there for this. This was great.
Right. What a great pickup.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
And
the stuff I long for. And we get it so fleetingly, but it goes a long way with me.
and you know that Superman never thought that would come back. This isn't a Mxyzptlk situation where he knows, okay, I got to prepare for the next time. So it was great to see him have to strategize. And I got to say, I like where it ended up, where his solution was to let's have this not keep happening over and over. But when this scene started out, Jimmy shows up with basically a Monty Python skit version worthy mustache that I literally laughed at. It was just sheer comedy for the sake of comedy's sake. And you pile that on with the voice of Psy, where it was "Shut up, you bother me." It was straight out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon of, shut up, shutting up. And I thought, man, this is the era when all of that was what kids were used to. So you have a gangster open his mouth and start talking like that. You're like, oh, okay, he's the boss because the boss talks like that. And it was charming.
100%. Jack Larson was so good and so funny in this scene when, yes, the mustache is very funny, but when he picks up the telephone, because his cover stories, there's a problem with the line. People are claiming their calls aren't coming through. The telephone company sent me here. And he picks up the phone and starts tapping it with the handle of the screwdriver. I loved it. It was great. And then Psy tells him to untangle the cord, and he like wraps it around himself. Like, it's one of those things. You might expect me to just feel like, oh, this was silly, but I really enjoyed it. I found it very humorous. And then I love the flip where when Jimmy is subjected to this truth potion that he's made to drink, this too was subtle, but there's a moment where, because Sai asks him a few questions about, who is Superman? And he's like, no one knows. And does he have any weaknesses? And there's a pause, right? Like you can tell even under the effects of this drug, he's trying to withhold this information that he knows can hurt Superman. It's just a quick beat, but it went a long way. And it really showed like he's within this situation, he was struggling. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and I even tracked that his body language was tight, like he was trying to keep it in.
Yeah, for sure. And as I was rewatching this, because it had been a little while since I had seen it initially, when Horton lets him go after he comes out of the effects of the drug, I was saying to myself, what is that? But thankfully, it's a good payoff. There's a reason they let him go. They're going to follow him and whatnot. But at first, I was saying to myself, man, they've really gotten lax, these villains in season 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I think by this time, you're asking my opinion of the color seasons. I will say, though, I think Jack started to really get his comedy timing down. He became a better comedic performer as the seasons went on. And the quick little delivery tone that Jack had when they are about to make him drink the serum. And he says, "No, thank you." And then Cy pulls out a gun and Jack goes, "Thank you."
Yeah.
That was just, it was a more mature way of handling that line that Jack brought.
I agree wholeheartedly. Back at the Daily Planet, Jimmy asks to talk to Clark in private and explains what happened. Clark has a plan and asks Jimmy to meet him later at his apartment. That evening, Clark produces the lead pipe and tells Jimmy that Superman has a plan to use it as bait. Right on cue, Horton and his man who had been tailing Jimmy barge in and take the pipe from them at gunpoint. Clark lets them go. All I could think about as Jimmy was explaining to Clark what happened was, boy, is Jimmy lucky this was not season 1 Clark.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Clark really took it in stride, no?
Absolutely.
But the fact that Jim took responsibility and told Clark about it, I really did appreciate. I mean, it's funny because Clark's initial reaction, it's a little bit of a hint of season 1 of like, we did what? But then he quickly does calm himself and right away is coming up with this plan. But yeah, I appreciated that Jim took the responsibility for it. And I have to say, I guess, this one does a good job because we're not told, because Clark doesn't tell Jim exactly what the plan is, right? So we don't know yet at this point. We see that pipe that looks just like the one we saw in the defeat of Superman. So as far as we know, that's the actual kryptonite. And they keep you on the hook because we see Clark use his X-ray vision to observe Horton and his guy in the hallway when they saw open the pipe and they take out the rock, and Clark lets them go. It's like, well, why wouldn't he go after them? Well, perhaps it's actual kryptonite. So especially for the kids, I feel like this, it keeps the tension.
Yeah, that's not bad. I was going to ask you too, was it ever established before that there was a 5-foot radius of danger? Because when Jimmy's under the truth serum, he mentioned specifically if he gets within 5 feet of this stuff.
That's a good question. I'd have to go back to the defeat of Superman. I mean, that's the only time it would have come up. And I just don't remember offhand if they were that specific and explicit. I don't know, but that's a good question.
All right. Well, I'll forgive it because obviously it's integral to the episode here. But I was just curious if maybe they were giving you a second dip into the continuity lake.
Well, so, okay. I think this was new for this episode. And the reason why I say that is thinking back to the defeat of Superman, Lois, and Jim end up in that basement locked in with the kryptonite. And I feel like that room was large enough that I feel like he could have gotten more than 5 feet away from it. So yeah, I don't think that was explicitly established there.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, these were days where those episodes would come and go, and you could get away with a temporal memory in your child's audience mind.
If you have children and want a family-friendly store, look no further than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, and check out awyeahcomics.com for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw yeah. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. Visit them in person in Whippany, New Jersey, or reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Whether you're an independent filmmaker or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. As the Superman Week festivities continue, Superman shows up to inspect the sculpture of him made by Vandeglass. Right before he arrives, though, Horton knocks out the real sculptor, takes his place, and hides the kryptonite in the head of the statue. Superman collapses when he gets closer, and Horton and his man head out to knock off a payroll. Anything about that scene that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of interesting. I would say, even as a kid, I would kind of notice. So when the crook imitating Vandeglass draws the line on the carpet that is the 5-foot radius from the kryptonite that is now in the back of the sculpture's head. When Superman does arrive and starts to walk forward, that line's not there.
No.
So the carpet is completely pristine. They just, I suppose, shot it out of order. But as a child, always wanting to look for these detective clues about everything, I do remember noticing, wait a minute, where did the line go? I thought it was odd that when they knocked out Vandeglass, that Side takes him behind the couch and I guess laid down to change clothes with him, because they make a point of him standing up from behind the couch and now he's wearing Side's clothes. So why he would do that completely horizontally behind the couch, I don't understand. Maybe that director's choice. But I did laugh when Superman arrived and he started to feel weak, and Cy wanted to explain about the kryptonite. He's like, yeah, that's because you got a hole in your head. And he pulls the kryptonite out from the sculpture head. That was kind of funny. But it really, this episode and some others really makes me question, is the Daily Planet socially responsible for printing basically everything criminals need to know all the time to pull off every heist that they could ever hope to do? because it seems like in this episode, the criminals were like, well, the Daily Planet published all the details about this massive payroll for $500,000. We know basically the root, we know everything about it. The Daily Planet published Superman's daily schedule, so that's why they knew he was going to be here at the Vanderglass's studio. Had the Planet not printed those things, he would have been fine.
I know it at a certain point, it does feel like they're asking for trouble, or maybe they're just trying to sustain their own existence, right? They can put this stuff out there. People will take the bait. They'll be able to report on what happens. I don't disagree with you, but I will say this. I'm so happy that in this show that, and I guess ultimately this came down more to Lois and Jimmy than Perry or the paper, but the fact that they kept the existence of kryptonite secret, I love.
Well, I mean, unlike Margot Kidder, at least they didn't publish the existence of kryptonite on day one.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Well, I do. So this, like I said, that goes a long way for me. Oh, also, I either missed this or I forgot. Where is the payroll? Where do they go exactly to try to knock it off? It looks like a jail because we have the bars and everything.
That I was never sure of.
Yeah. Well, on that note, they go to the site of their planned robbery, whatever that might be, and they find the security guard already unconscious, felled by the spiked coffee he had sent out for. But then a hardy Superman arrives and apprehends them, bending the cell bars around their heads. It was all a ruse, as Clark later explains to Jimmy, and it had the dual benefit of catching Horton in the act and dispelling any notion of Superman having this kryptonite weakness. So, as I'm watching it, I will admit I was getting a little frustrated where I'm saying to myself, all right, like just nab these guys, right? But it's not like no one knew where Horton was, right? It wasn't a matter of they needed to get him. It's that they needed to catch him in the act. So this allowed that to happen. And then I really do like this other angle of trying to dispel this notion of Superman having a weak, like you don't want that information out there. So I really did like that angle here.
I absolutely loved that. I got to that moment and I thought, oh, that's clever. That, again, going back to the Mxyzptlk, encounters of he has to use ingenuity every time. And this seemed worthy of that. This was a very 1950s ingenious Clark coming up with a solution for not just the day, but for the eternal problem of kryptonite. And for him to just hold it in his hand and go, how this notion got out there, I'll just never know. Well, there you go. All the criminals now are going to say, save yourself, don't go down this road. And that was just a touch of genius.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved that. That was definitely a highlight. But one more thing on the kryptonite, it does break my heart that, especially now that we're in the color era, like no attempt is made to give us like proper green glowing kryptonite. Even in an instance like this where it's actually fake, but still Superman could have made it to look like it's supposed to.
Well, he mentioned that he covered it with glowing phosphorus, so it would have been nice to see it. I mean, if memory serves, even back to the Mole Men, they were still doing some glowing effects of some things. So why not here?
Yeah. So it goes. A bit of a missed opportunity.
I do have to say that my practical mind did laugh when Superman, opens the bars, sticks the crook's head in, and shuts the bars again. I'm thinking, it's a jail cell. It has an open door. The guard has the key. Just put them in the cell and lock the door. But instead, two separate sections of the front-facing bars area now have criminals in there, and then Superman leaves. So I'm thinking, what happens now? The police have to get them out of there. Do they bring the Jaws of Life? Do they have to hacksaw them? Do they have to torch them? Either way, this jail cell now has to be repaired. It's going to cost the city money. But I think it was I retcon it because I feel like, again, if this is the Clark who not only solves the problem of the day, but any that might occur in the future, maybe his thought was, if I so humiliate these crooks, it's not just, oh, he catches us, he throws us in jail, we get out. It happens over and over and over. No, they had to sit there like your tongue is stuck to a frozen pole in A Christmas Story, and everyone knows that you were there like that. Maybe it makes them give up the life of crime. It was a thought.
I like that because, yeah, on the one hand, it's like, sure, from the show's perspective, they want to show the audience Superman bending the bars and whatnot. But in story, it's like, yeah, why? Why exactly would he do that? I like that. I'll go with that.
Yeah, just humiliate them out of that entire life path.
Yeah. Finally, Clark is tasked with interviewing Superman on live television, and Lois and Jimmy watch with glee to see how Clark will pull this off, hinting at his dual identity. As the interview unfolds, the audience hears the voice of Clark, who explains that they wanted to give Superman the spotlight. After the camera cuts to the parade outside, Superman enters the sound booth to pack up the equipment he had played Clark's part from, and to remove the hat and glasses from the head of the sculpture. In the end, Superman waves to the crowd during the well-attended parade, achieved with generous use of stock footage there.
Yes. Also very charming to have Lois and Jimmy ever so slightly toss out, so Clark, you're going to be interviewing Superman today, and Jimmy, again, delivering his line very, very well of, that'll be interesting, and even so much that they wanted to watch it in Clark's own apartment, where Jimmy has the gumption to ask for Clark's keys so that they can watch the interview, and they pull up chairs, like practically getting the popcorn out, just thinking, okay, this time we've got him. Beyond the fact that I noticed that we're in the color era and Clark's television broadcasts in black and white, which I just suppose he was very frugal with his money, his amazing convertible notwithstanding. I think it also achieved the effect that you don't notice that the sculpture doesn't have a skin tone. When it starts out in the broadcast booth, you see Clark's face wearing glasses and hat, but you don't notice that it's gray clay if it's in black and white. So, okay. Isn't it very, very lucky that Clark was only in ownership of a color, black and white television? But my question to you is, when I first saw this as a kid, and granted, this was the era of Silver Age comics, I thought super ventriloquism. Did you?
I'm trying to remember the first time I saw this. I don't know that I was, oh, you know what? I think I probably did think he was throwing his voice, not that he was playing a recording. So yeah. I mean, this time around I had the memory of it, so I knew where it was going. But yeah, the first time I probably did think that he was throwing his voice.
Yeah. And I noticed that he kept it very brief, that he asked him one question, and then at the end is, well, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Yeah. So there's that. I mean, there's also the fact that, I mean, boy, was he lucky that Lois and Jimmy just wanted to watch it on TV and not be there in the studio. And likewise, the fact that Clark seemed to have the full run of the entire studio. He was running this entire operation.
Right. Including the camera.
Yeah.
that panned from where statue Clark was to where Superman was sitting behind the desk. So that movement was operated by no one. So I would assume, though, that the 1950s Superman, who has plenty of robot copies of himself, could easily make a camera turn. But I'm right there with you. I even went back to listen to the dialogue again of how is it that he had that space to himself. You would think that there would be many people who would want to have been there.
Yeah. Here's the thing. If this had been the main thrust of the episode, like the whole thing was centering around how is he going to interview himself, I probably would have been more annoyed at the payoff. But this doesn't come into play until the very end. And so it just ends up being kind of a fun extended button on it. So I can go with it. But yeah, that's a pretty big stretch that there would be no one else working in the studio while this is happening, or like you said, anyone just wanting to be there to observe.
Right. And I'll assume that he returned the sculpture. He didn't just walk off and leave it there like it looked.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, though, you're right. In total, it was a wonderful story, and I like that there have been others like it in comic continuity. One of the Brian Michael Bendis stories that I did like during his run was a similar thing of Superman Day,
Yeah.
where the rest of the Justice League had to cover for him for one day, and you really appreciate how much work that actually is. And again, you see Superman really not comfortable with this. He did not want to do this for any kind of attention or accolades. But Lois explains to him, but it's important to them. It's important to those people who you help that you accept their thanks. And that was how she convinces him to do this. But the fact that from time to time there is this idea that we should celebrate when a person does so much for others, that this episode in particular, I can forgive much of what the assembly process had in the gaps in the mortar, just because the sentiment is so great. So almost going back to Around the World with Superman, when Perry said, by gosh, we're going to have this contest and we're going to have people write in about why Superman is so great. I like that from time to time they show that.
I agree with that. And I also appreciate kind of the scope that this episode is able to provide in terms of Superman, how he's viewed by the city and the world.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear all of those testimonials, and we're hearing about a number of overseas adventures, for example, there are things that the show wasn't necessarily built to be able to show you, but you're at least getting a little bit more of a sense of his global role. And even on a more day-to-day basis, the playground, the camp, delivering the newspapers, things like that. Again, I think it just provides a more well-rounded view beyond the kind of typical villain of the week stories that we're seeing. And then even something like the parade. I mean, yes, it's a ton of stock footage, but you get those couple of shots of Superman in there waving and surrounded by all of those people, and you use a bit of your imagination. I think it really just kind of gives you a little bit more of a broader view of the world of the show.
Absolutely. And in the same breath where I say, there are plot gaps, there are also things that were so well thought out. Not just the cleverness of let me dispel kryptonite forever, but the consistency of that Superman will both save you when you're in dire need, but he will also, much like a farmer in Smallville, plan for the crops in 5 years. And so to see him like build a playground for boys at an orphanage and do these things that are infrastructure that are meant to help year after year after year after year, that he doesn't only catch you when you're falling, but he builds, I'll take that as a trade-off for any little plot contrivance that they had to do. And did you catch the throwaway line when they were saying, the itinerary says that Superman has to be at the artist sculpture studio, and they go, yeah, he was going to. They asked him to christen the SS Superman, but he couldn't be in two places at once. And I thought, okay, so if he christens it, does that mean that the ship only gets the name if he christens it, or do they name it anyway? And so somewhere out there in this continuity is the SS Superman. And I just find those little touches in the balance sheet of what we get in this episode, very, very much in the fulfilling column.
Yes, well said. Before we give our rating for the episode, anything we didn't talk about in this one that you wanted to?
Yes. Actual Superman week in Earth, whatever we live in, was in celebration of the to the day, 50th anniversary of the premiere episode of Adventures of Superman. It took place in Los Angeles. Noel Neill was there, Jack Larson was there, and they made Superman Week, July 10th through July 16th, 2001, to commemorate the premiere episode of July 10th, 1951. So not only did everything you and I talked about why it's heartwarming that people would want to appreciate Superman and the good that he did, but I just love it that in our world, we felt the same about this show, that we could not celebrate the 50-year anniversary of this show. And the way we chose to do that was by giving it Superman Week.
Beautiful. No, I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So we have retired our Fedora rating system for the color years, and we have shifted over to Great Caesar's Ghosts because we wanted the color era to have its own rating system so that we're not constantly trying to hold these episodes up against the black and white ones, but rather just kind of evaluate them on their own merit. So on a scale of 1 to 5, Great Caesar's Ghosts, how many would you give Superman Week?
4.
Same for me. This is also a 4 for me. All right. Well, I thank you so much for joining me. Where would you like to direct folks if they want to keep up with you and everything you're up to?
Oh, feel free to follow me on Instagram at Wearing the Cape. And on Facebook, you can find me under my name, Daniel Sanchez. No secret identity required.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience. Make sure you come back next week. And until then, as always, remember, only Superman can do super things. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, a long-running weekly series mining Superman's vast mythology across time and media. Subscribe today.